The wind screamed through the mountain pass, howling like 1,000 lost souls. Snow came down in heavy, relentless sheets, covering the trees and swallowing every sound that dared to exist. The road was narrow and barely visible, its edges blurred by ice and fog. Through that white wilderness, a black SUV crawled slowly uphill, its tires crunching over frozen gravel. Inside sat John and Martha Hale, both in their late 50s, the glow of the dashboard painting their faces pale blue. Neither spoke for several minutes. The silence between them had become a living thing, cold, stretched thin, and uncomfortable. John gripped the wheel tighter. His knuckles were white, and the rhythm of the windshield wipers seemed to mimic his heartbeat. Martha looked out the window, her reflection faintly staring back at her. Tired eyes, soft wrinkles, and the faint trace of the woman she used to be. She turned to him, trying to sound lighthearted. "It'll be good for us," she said, her voice barely audible over the engine. "No phones, no noise, just us." John forced a smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. Sure, just us, but both of them knew it wasn't that simple. Their marriage, once full of laughter, had become a quiet arrangement. Two people living side by side, not together. This trip was supposed to fix that. A weekend in the mountains, fresh air, solitude. The GPS showed one last turn. "You have arrived at your destination," it announced cheerfully. But when they looked ahead, all they saw was a blur of snow and trees. "There!" Martha pointed, squinting through the windshield. That's it. At the end of the path stood an old wooden cabin. Its roof bowed under years of snow. Smoke did not rise from its chimney. The windows were covered in thick frost, and the porch sagged slightly. It looked lonely, like it had been waiting for someone. John parked the car and killed the engine. The sudden silence pressed against their ears. Snowflakes landed on the windshield, melting into tiny rivers. He got out, boots sinking into the powder, his breath visible in the freezing air. Martha followed, pulling her coat tight around her shoulders. When John pushed the cabin door open, the hinges groaned in protest. The smell of cold wood, dust, and something faintly metallic greeted them. Inside, the air felt untouched for decades. The walls were lined with old timber, cracked and discolored. A fireplace dominated one corner of the room, and to their surprise, it was already stacked with logs, as if someone had prepared for their arrival. "That's strange," Martha murmured. She brushed her gloved fingers over the mantle, sweeping away a thin layer of dust. Beneath it, faint marks appeared, handprints. "Small ones. Maybe the owners came up before us," she said quickly, though her voice trembled. John didn't answer. He stood still, listening. Somewhere above, faint footsteps echoed, soft and deliberate. He frowned. "There's someone upstairs." Martha turned to him, confused. "Upstairs, I thought." He hesitated. The listing said it's a one-story cabin. They stood frozen in silence. The sound came again. Step, drag, step. Then nothing. Only the groaning of the wind outside. Trying to shake it off, John forced a laugh. Probably the house settling. These old places make noise. Martha smiled weakly, but the unease didn't leave her eyes. They unpacked quietly, filling the empty cabin with the sounds of zippers and bags. Small human noises against the vast silence that surrounded them. As night began to fall, the storm outside intensified. Snow hammered against the windows, like fingertips tapping impatiently. The generator outside stuttered to life, filling the room with a dim, flickering light. Shadows danced along the walls as John lit the fire. The warmth helped a little. They ate dinner by the hearth. Canned soup, crackers, and hot tea. The air smelled of smoke and pine. "You remember our first winter," Martha said softly, staring into the fire. "You burned dinner and we ended up roasting marshmallows instead." John smiled faintly. "Yeah, we were kids then." She looked at him for a moment, studying his face in the firelight. There was something distant in his eyes, like he wasn't really there with her. She sighed and turned back to the flames. But then something odd happened. She heard her own voice again. The same words. "You remember our first winter?" It came faintly, echoing from the hallway behind them. She froze. John turned. "What did you say?" Nothing," she whispered. They both looked toward the hallway. The shadows there seemed to shift, stretching longer than they should have. The wind howled through the cracks of the door, and for a brief moment, they could swear they heard something else in it. A whisper that almost sounded like laughter. Hours passed. The storm raged on. They decided to sleep in the main room, near the fire. The power flickered twice before settling. Outside, the forest was completely hidden under the storm's weight. Around 11:20 p.m., a sound jolted John awake. Tap, tap, tap. It came from the window. He sat up, heart thudding. The tapping came again, slow and rhythmic, not random. It had a pattern. Martha stirred. "What is it?" He grabbed the flashlight. Probably a branch. He walked toward the window, every step creaking against the old floorboards. The light beam hit the frosted glass. Nothing, just white tap, tap, tap. This time it was louder, more deliberate. John unlatched the door. "Stay here," he said. The storm blasted through as he opened it. Snow bit into his face like shards of glass. The flashlight beam cut across the porch and into the white void. No one, no movement, just silence. He was about to step back inside when he noticed them. Footprints, fresh ones, leading away from the door toward the tree line. Small, like a child's. He followed them with the light. They disappeared a few feet away, swallowed by snow. A low groan of wind moved through the trees, and something about it sounded wrong, like a voice trying to form words. "John," Martha called from inside, panic rising in her voice. "There's someone upstairs." He froze. The light shook in his hand. Slowly, he turned to look at her. "There is no upstairs," he said. Before he could move, a heavy thump came from above, followed by a dragging sound. Long, slow, wood scraping against wood. The ceiling dust trickled down onto the floor. John's breath caught in his throat. "Get your coat," he said, his voice barely a whisper. But Martha was staring at something behind him, her eyes wide, reflecting the flicker of the fire. "John," she whispered. "Don't move." He turned. The front door, still half open, was now completely wide. Snow swirled inside in long ribbons, coating the floor. The footprints that had led away from the cabin now led back in. The fire sputtered, dimmed, then flared violently, throwing sparks across the room. Somewhere above them, the dragging stopped. Silence. Then, faintly, a sound, a soft, high-pitched giggle. John's flashlight flickered once and died. The darkness closed in around them like a living thing, and outside, through the storm, something unseen whispered. Not loud enough to understand, but clear enough to chill the blood. The wind carried it through the cracks of the cabin, through the thin walls, through the spaces between their racing heartbeats. They weren't alone. A single candle burned in the corner of the cabin, its flame trembling against the draft that slipped through the cracks in the walls. The storm outside hadn't eased. If anything, it had grown angrier, howling like something alive. John and Martha sat close to the fire, their bodies stiff, the sound of the wind wrapping around them like a shroud. Neither spoke, neither dared. The old floor still creaked occasionally, as though footsteps moved just out of sight. John stared at the ceiling, listening. Every few minutes, he swore he heard a soft, dragging sound. Something heavy, being pulled across the floor above them. But that was impossible. He had checked the blueprint of this cabin before they came. There was no second story, just one floor and an attic sealed off decades ago. Yet, the noise was too loud, too deliberate to ignore. He stood, grabbing the flashlight. "I'm going to check it out." Martha's voice cracked. "John, please don't. It's not. I need to know what's up there," he said, his tone heavy with something between fear and denial. He moved toward the back room, his boots echoing in the small, cold space. The cabin seemed to breathe around him, the wood groaning as if it disapproved of his decision. In the bedroom, behind a faded wardrobe that looked like it hadn't been moved in decades, John noticed a faint outline on the wall, a square shape, a hatch of some kind. He ran his fingers over the edges, feeling the cold iron nails that sealed it shut. The wood around it was scorched, blackened by fire long ago. He hesitated for a moment, the air thick with the scent of soot and something else. "Decay. Martha!" he called quietly. "Come here." She appeared in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes wide and wet from the smoke of the fire. "What is that?" He grabbed the hammer from their emergency kit and began prying the nails loose. One by one, they came out with long, shrill squeals. The last nail fell, and instantly, a gust of freezing air burst through, as if the cabin had exhaled for the first time in years. It blew out the candle on the nightstand, plunging the room into half darkness. John pointed the flashlight into the opening. Inside, a narrow staircase led upward into blackness. The beam of light barely reached the top. Martha whispered, "I thought you said there was no second floor." "There wasn't," he muttered. "At least not in the listing." He looked back at her, his breath visible in the cold air. Maybe they closed it off. Maybe it's just, but he didn't finish. The silence pressed in too tightly. He started climbing, one step at a time. The wood creaked beneath his weight, dust swirling around his legs. Martha followed reluctantly, clutching his coat from behind, as if afraid he might vanish if she let go. The staircase turned sharply, leading into a small room under the slanted roof. When John lifted the flashlight, both of them froze. It was a child's bedroom. The wallpaper peeled in long strips, the pattern of faded blue stars barely visible. A tiny wooden bed sat in one corner, its blankets stiff with frost. Toys were scattered across the floor. A cracked doll missing one eye. A toy truck rusted over. A small bowl with faded paint. And on a nightstand beside the bed sat a music box. It was old, its silver coating tarnished and dull. But as they entered, it began to move, the crank turning on its own, playing a soft, distorted lullaby that echoed around the small room. Martha's hand went to her mouth. "Oh my God!" On the nightstand beside the music box lay a photograph. John picked it up carefully. It showed a smiling family, a man, a woman, and a little girl, standing in front of the same cabin, the same furniture, the same curtains, but the date written in blue ink across the bottom read February 3rd, 1984. John's grip tightened around the photo. His eyes shifted to the background of the image. In the window behind the family, two faint shapes could be seen, blurred but distinctly human. Watching them, the music box slowed, the final note stretching into a long trembling hum before it stopped. The silence that followed was so thick, they could hear their own heartbeats. Then a whisper, so faint it could have been the wind. "Don't leave us again." The air turned bitterly cold. Martha's breath came in shallow gasps. "John, we need to go, now." They stumbled back down the stairs, the flashlight shaking in John's hand. But when they reached the bottom, something had changed. The cabin felt larger. The hallway that had once been short and narrow now stretched endlessly, fading into shadow. The air smelled wrong, damp, rotten, old. Martha clung to his arm. "John, this isn't real. This can't be." Then came the voices, faint at first, overlapping, like a crowd whispering behind a thin wall. "You took our home. You shouldn't have come back." John's chest tightened. "We didn't take anything," he shouted into the dark, his voice breaking. The lights went out, the fire in the living room dimmed to a red glow. The shadows on the walls began to move, stretching, twisting, shifting into vague human shapes. One leaned forward, its outline flickering in the dying light. Martha screamed and backed away, her foot catching on the rug. "John!" He pulled her up, but the shadow moved closer, crawling along the floor, its edges rippling like smoke. The whispers turned to cries. Desperate, angry cries that filled every inch of the cabin. They ran outside, bursting into the storm. The cold was brutal, biting their faces and hands. The snow blinded them, but John could see faint footprints leading away from the cabin toward the frozen lake. He followed them, his flashlight barely piercing the blizzard. At the edge of the lake, the beam caught something beneath the ice. He wiped the snow away with his boot and froze. There, under the thick sheet of ice, were 3 figures: a man, a woman, and a small child. Their faces were pale, their mouths open as if screaming. The flashlight trembled in his hand. Martha came running up behind him, crying that the owners, "It's them, isn't it?" John couldn't speak. His breath came out in short bursts, fogging the air. He turned slowly toward her, but before he could answer, the ice cracked. A low groaning sound came from below, followed by a shimmer. The reflection of the 2 bodies in the ice moved, and then, impossibly, there were 5 figures beneath the surface. The same family, and John and Martha, their faces mirrored beside them, eyes open, mouths frozen in silent terror. From beneath the ice came a whisper that rose into a hiss. "We never left." Then, more clearly, "Now neither will you." The wind howled across the lake, and the flashlight flickered once more, before dying completely. When morning came, the storm had cleared. A park ranger on patrol found the SUV buried halfway in snow at the edge of the trail. The cabin door was open, its interior eerily still. 2 coffee cups sat by the cold fire, steam still curling faintly from their rims, as if they had only just been poured. The ranger called out, but no one answered. As he turned to leave, something on the mantel caught his eye. A photograph in a wooden frame. He picked it up. It showed 5 people now. The family from 1984 and the Hales, smiling among them, as though they'd always belonged there. That evening, the ranger told his supervisor that he was done patrolling that area. "The wind," he said quietly. It sounded like voices. Locals in Windham County still talk about that cabin. The one sealed off after the Hales disappeared in 2002. They say hikers sometimes hear the faint sound of a music box drifting through the trees on snowy nights, playing a song that doesn't end. And if you walk close enough to the frozen lake, when the world is quiet and the moonlight hits just right, you might see faces beneath the ice, smiling faintly, waiting patiently. The snow keeps their secret well, but some secrets were never meant to stay frozen.
Please like and subscribe channel Fear Frequency for more horror stories. Thank you.